The congressional hearing room fell into a tense silence as former Attorney General Bill Barr leaned toward his microphone, his face flushed with irritation. "Representative Crockett, what you just said is completely false," he declared, his tone sharp and cutting through the air. "You are misleading the American people, and I will not sit here and let that happen." But Jasmine Crockett, the freshman congresswoman from Texas, didn't flinch. A faint smile touched her lips as she reached for a manila folder resting quietly on her desk. What happened in the next 30 seconds would send shockwaves through Washington, leaving one of the most powerful figures in modern American politics utterly speechless. This wasn't just another hearing. This was the moment a 42-year-old congresswoman was about to expose years of concealed truths, facts Bill Barr believed would never come to light. The evidence she held wouldn't simply challenge his statements. It would shatter his credibility and legacy. Before we dive into this confrontation, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our deep dives into major political moments. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and let's unpack what many insiders are calling the most devastating congressional takedown in history. William Pelham Barr had long stood as a giant within Washington's establishment. At 73, he'd served twice as Attorney General under both George H.W. Bush and Donald Trump. His reputation was that of a sharp legal strategist, a skilled interpreter of the Constitution, and a seasoned survivor of political storms spanning 4 decades. A Yale graduate, Barr was revered within conservative legal circles for his mastery of complex issues and his unwavering defense of executive authority. Known for his calm demeanor, he had built a career on dodging tough questions with layers of legal precision and calculated phrasing. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, a new voice on the national stage, but one that was already making waves in Congress. At 42, she brought a fresh and fearless energy to Washington, shaped by her years as a civil rights attorney and public defender in Texas. Unlike many colleagues who came from elite schools or political families, Crockett had earned her reputation fighting for people who couldn't afford justice. She knew the system's bias firsthand, and had learned how to dismantle it, one fact at a time. This wasn't just a face-off between two individuals. It was a generational clash between the old guard guarding power and a new movement demanding accountability. The hearing, officially, was about the Justice Department's handling of investigations during the Trump administration. But everyone in that room understood it was about something deeper. The truth about what really happened behind closed doors during some of America's most controversial moments. For Barr, this hearing was supposed to be a victory lap, a chance to restore his image after the turbulence of the Trump years. He came armed with carefully rehearsed answers, ready for the usual partisan routine, Republicans defending him, Democrats attacking him. What he hadn't expected was someone who had done meticulous research and uncovered documents that were never meant to resurface. For Crockett, this was her defining moment, to show she wasn't just another freshman easily intimidated by Washington elites. She and her team had spent weeks preparing, following paper trails others ignored, and building a case worthy of a prosecutor. She knew that taking on someone of Barr's stature carried political risk, but for her, truth outweighed fear. The hearing room was packed, reporters, cameras, aides, and staffers filling every seat. C-SPAN's cameras rolled as social media buzzed. Hashtags like Barr hearing and or Crockett EV's Barr began trending. Everyone sensed something major was about to unfold. But few realized just how explosive the next few hours would become. For the first hour, things went as expected. Barr parried questions with his trademark composure and evasive phrasing. "I don't recall that specific conversation," he repeated often, just enough to sound credible while revealing nothing. Then it was Crockett's turn. She adjusted her microphone, took a sip of water, and locked eyes with Barr. Her tone was calm but firm. "Mr. Barr," she began, "in your previous testimony before this committee, you stated that you had no knowledge of any pressure being applied to prosecutors in the Roger Stone case. Is that still your position?" Barr shifted in his chair but kept his expression steady. "Representative, as I've said before, all decisions made in that case were based solely on prosecutorial discretion and the pursuit of justice." Crockett raised an eyebrow and pulled out a document from her folder. "That's interesting," she said evenly. because I have here an email dated February 11th, 2020, from the lead prosecutor in the Stone case. Would you like me to read it aloud? A flicker of unease crossed Barr's face, though his voice remained controlled. I'm not aware of the email you're referring to, Representative. There were many communications during that period, Crockett continued, her tone sharpening slightly. This email, Mr. Barr, states, and I quote, "The Attorney General's office has made it clear that the sentencing recommendation must be reduced." This directive comes straight from the top. Does that refresh your memory? Barr leaned forward, his jaw tightening. Representative, you're taking this out of context. The Justice Department routinely reviews sentencing recommendations. Out of context? Crockett interrupted, a sharp edge in her tone. Mr. Barr, 4 career prosecutors withdrew from that case. 4. These weren't political appointees. They were career professionals who had served under both Republican and Democratic administrations. Are you seriously telling this committee their withdrawals were just a coincidence? The room fell silent except for the clicking of cameras. Every eye was locked on Barr, waiting for his response. He took a slow breath, clearly searching for a way out. Representative Crockett, he began, I understand you're new to Congress, but these kinds of inflammatory accusations without proper context, inflammatory? Crockett's voice rose slightly. Mr. Barr, I'm not making accusations. I'm reading from documents. Documents provided to this committee by your former colleagues. There was a brief pause before Representative Howitt, with noticeable irony, interjected, So, are you calling them liars? And this was the moment Barr made his fatal mistake. Whether it was arrogance, irritation, or simply the habit of a man too long in power, he forgot what it felt like to be truly challenged. He leaned into the microphone and spoke the words that would define the hearing. Representative Crockett, what you're doing here is exactly what I'd expect from someone with limited experience in these matters. You're lying. You're fabricating evidence to score political points. And frankly, it's beneath the dignity of this institution. The gallery gasped audibly. Several Democrats looked stunned. Republicans shifted uneasily in their seats. The chairman raised his gavel to restore order, but before he could speak, Crockett lifted her hand. Mr. Barr, she said, her voice calm but cutting. Did you just accuse me of lying? Did you just suggest that I would fabricate evidence before this committee? Barr hesitated for a moment, perhaps realizing he'd gone too far, but pride kept him from retreating. I'm saying what you're presenting is a misrepresentation of the facts, he replied firmly. And yes, I believe you know it's a misrepresentation. If that makes you a liar, then so be it, the room erupted. The chairman pounded his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Through the noise, Crockett remained perfectly composed. The faint smile returned as she calmly reached for another folder, thicker than the first. When she opened it, several committee members could see it was filled with official Justice Department documents, each stamped and signed. Mr. Chairman, Crockett said, raising her voice just enough to carry over the commotion, I'd like to request a brief recess. It appears Mr. Barr may need a few minutes to reconsider his statement, especially after reviewing what I'm about to present to this committee. The chairman, a seasoned Democrat well acquainted with political drama, immediately recognized the gravity of the moment. The committee will recess for 15 minutes, he announced, striking his gavel again. As members stood and the room buzzed with tension, the real scene unfolded at the witness table. Barr's attorney rushed to his side, whispering urgently. Several Republican colleagues gathered around him, their expressions tight with concern. Across the aisle, Crockett was surrounded by Democratic members, many offering quiet words of support, others simply looking on, knowing they had just witnessed the turning point of the hearing. But she wasn't celebrating. Instead, she carefully arranged her papers, preparing for what everyone sensed would be a powerful second act. The media area was buzzing with activity. Brazora, known for her sharp instincts, was in high demand. Reporters typed furiously, sending out alerts and updates. Breaking. Brock accuses Representative Crockett of lying in heated exchange flashed across headlines. Social media erupted with hashtags. Barr meltdown and Crockett has receipts began trending. Major news outlets interrupted their broadcasts to air clips of the exchange. Yet perhaps the most revealing moment came from Barr himself. The man who had entered the hearing with absolute confidence now sat hunched at the witness table, reviewing notes with his attorney. His face, flushed with anger only moments earlier, had turned pale. Several times he shook his head slowly, as though struggling to believe what had happened. Meanwhile, Crockett stood by the window, gazing toward the Washington Monument. An aide approached and showed her something on a phone. She nodded, said a few words, and returned to sorting her documents. There was no triumph in her expression, only calm focus. She seemed fully aware that she was preparing for a historic moment. As the recess continued, quiet murmurs spread through the room. Veteran reporters compared notes, trying to guess what evidence Crockett held. The shared belief was that it was something significant, but what exactly? "I heard she got material from a whistleblower," one whispered. "No, my source says they're deleted emails," another replied. "Whatever it is," a third said, "look at Barr. I've never seen him like this." Indeed, Barr's demeanor had shifted dramatically. The man who once sparred with Robert Mueller, who had faced heavy criticism over his handling of the Mueller report, and who had withstood accusations of politicizing the Justice Department, now appeared genuinely unsettled. Several times, he pulled out his phone as if to make a call but placed it back down each time. The Republican members of the committee were also uneasy. Some spoke in low tones, occasionally glancing toward both Barr and Crockett. One senior member was overheard saying, "We need to know what she has before this continues," but Crockett kept her strategy to herself. Calm and deliberate, she took notes on her legal pad. When fellow Democrats tried to approach, she politely declined, saying she needed to concentrate. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to be distracted. When Chairman Johnson called the hearing back to order, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. What began as a standard oversight session had turned into political theater broadcast live across the nation. Every major network carried it with breaking news banners rolling across the screens. "Mr. Barr," Crockett began, her tone measured but assured, the voice of someone confident in her evidence. "Before the break, you accused me of lying and fabricating information. I want to give you one chance to retract that statement." Barr, clearly coached during the break, answered with restraint though tension was visible in his jaw. "Representative, I stand by my statement that your interpretation of events is inaccurate and misleading." Crockett nodded slightly. "Very well. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record a set of documents that will clarify who is being inaccurate and misleading here." She lifted a thick folder. The clicking of cameras filled the room. "Let's start with this," she said, laying a document on her desk. "This memo, dated January 30th, 2020, comes from your personal files, Mr. Barr. A memo that by Justice Department policy should have been archived, yet never appeared in official records." "Would you like me to read it aloud?" Barr's attorney quickly objected. "Mr. Chairman, we haven't reviewed these alleged documents." "Oh, please," Crockett interjected smoothly. "Mr. Chairman, these were obtained through proper FOIA requests and whistleblower disclosures. They're verified and bear Mr. Barr's signature, unless he's now denying his own handwriting." The chairman turned to Barr. "Mr. Barr, do you dispute the authenticity of your signature?" Barr was cornered and everyone knew it. Denying it meant inviting forensic scrutiny. Admitting it meant conceding its validity. "I would need to see the document in question," he said carefully. Crockett smiled. "Of course." She signaled an aide who handed Barr a copy. All eyes followed as he read, his expression growing more strained with each passing moment. "While Mr. Barr reviews that," Crockett continued, "let me explain to the American people what this memo states." In his own handwriting, Mr. Barr wrote, "Spoke with POTUS about Stone sentencing. Handled delicately, need to reduce without appearing to intervene directly." The room exploded in chaos. Committee members shouted over one another. Reporters scrambled to ask questions. The chairman struck his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Through it all, Barr remained frozen, the document trembling in his hands. "But that's not all," Crockett said, raising her voice above the noise. "There's more." Over the next 10 minutes, she methodically revealed document after document, each more incriminating than the last. A text exchange between Barr and a senior White House official discussing how to manage the narrative around the Mueller report before its release. an email where Barr explicitly directed staff to align investigations with the president's public positions. The hearing room had become the epicenter of political shock, and Crockett, calm and precise, was in complete control. A digital recording. Yes, a phone call in which Barr could be clearly heard saying, "I don't care what the career prosecutors think. This is what needs to happen." With each new revelation, Barr appeared to sink deeper into his chair. His attorney had stopped objecting, realizing that every interruption only highlighted the damaging evidence being presented. "Mr. Barr," Crockett said, her tone precise and firm, "you sat here and called me a liar. You accused me of fabricating evidence. Yet every document I've shown today bears your signature, your voice, or your direct authorization. So I'll ask you again, who is truly misleading the American people?" Barr finally spoke, though the authority in his voice was gone. "Representative, these documents are being taken entirely out of context. The president has the constitutional authority." "To what, Mr. Barr?" Crockett interrupted. "To intervene in criminal prosecutions of his associates? To use the Justice Department as his personal law firm? Because that's precisely what these records demonstrate. And do you know what's most significant about them?" She paused for a moment, allowing her words to settle. "They were all created after you testified before Congress, claiming that no such interference had ever occurred. Which means you didn't just mislead Congress once. You did so repeatedly under oath, while serving as the nation's top law enforcement officer." But Crockett wasn't finished. She had reserved the most consequential evidence for last. "Mr. Chairman, I have one final document to submit," she announced. "This one is notable because it doesn't come from Mr. Barr's time as Attorney General under President Trump. It dates back to his first tenure under President George H.W. Bush." Barr's head lifted sharply, a flash of surprise crossing his face for the first time. "You see," Crockett continued evenly, "Mr. Barr has a consistent pattern. This 1992 document shows him engaging in the same conduct. Political interference in prosecutions, misleading Congress, and concealing the truth. The difference back then was that we didn't have emails or text messages to confirm it. What we did have were memos like this one, where Mr. Barr wrote, 'Congress doesn't need to know everything we do. Executive privilege covers a multitude of sins.'" She looked directly at him. "A multitude of sins, Mr. Barr. Your words, not mine." What followed would become a lasting moment in Washington memory. William Barr, the man who had endured political battles, investigations, and high-profile hearings, the man long regarded as a steadfast defender of executive power, slowly lowered his gaze. When he looked up again, the defiance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something resembling resignation. "Representative Crockett," he began quietly, his voice barely audible, prompting the room to lean in. "I would like to consult with my counsel." "Of course, Mr. Barr," Crockett replied, her tone unexpectedly calm. "But before you do, I want you and everyone here to understand something. This isn't about party politics. It's not about personal victories. It's about the integrity of our justice system. When the Attorney General of the United States lies to Congress and compromises prosecutorial independence for political reasons, he doesn't just break his oath. He betrays every American who believes in the rule of law." Crockett began collecting her papers, stacking them neatly as she continued. "You called me a liar, Mr. Barr, but these documents, your own documents, tell a different story. A story of an Attorney General who forgot that his loyalty was to the Constitution, not to any president." As Barr consulted quietly with his attorney, the hearing room filled with a mix of disbelief, shock, and nervous energy. Members from both parties struggled to process what had just unfolded. Several Republicans who had come prepared to defend Barr were now silent, while Democrats tried to avoid appearing too celebratory. Recognizing the significance of the moment, the chairman made his decision. "Given the serious nature of the evidence presented, this committee will require time to review these documents thoroughly. Mr. Barr, you remain under oath and will be recalled for further testimony. This hearing is recessed until further notice." As the gavel struck, the room erupted into motion. Reporters rushed toward both Barr and Crockett, shouting questions. Barr's security team immediately surrounded him, escorting him out through a side door, his attorney following closely. The image of Barr leaving the chamber, quickly and under pressure, would become one of the defining visuals of the entire controversy. Crockett, by contrast, remained seated for a moment, composed and steady. When she finally stood, she was surrounded by colleagues and journalists, but simply said, "The documents speak for themselves. The American people deserve the truth, and today they received it." Within minutes of the hearing's conclusion, social media was in overdrive. Crockett destroys Barr became the #1 trending topic worldwide. The clip of Barr calling Crockett a liar, followed by her methodical dismantling of his credibility, spread across every platform, viewed millions of times within an hour. Online users reacted with a mix of admiration and humor. "Jasmine Crockett just gave a masterclass in keeping that same energy," one post read, gaining hundreds of thousands of likes. "Barr really thought he could intimidate a black woman who was a public defender? She's faced tougher opponents before breakfast," another viral comment joked. Memes appeared almost instantly. One video paired Crockett's questioning with dramatic superhero music, while another edited every time Barr's expression changed as new evidence surfaced, set to the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme. Yet beyond the humor, serious discussion was unfolding. Legal experts filled news panels, debating the potential criminal implications of Barr's apparent false statements to Congress. The term perjury charges began circulating more frequently by the hour. By evening, Washington's political landscape had shifted dramatically. The first sign came when 3 Republican senators, all longtime Barr allies, released statements distancing themselves from him. Senator Johnson of Wisconsin wrote, "The evidence presented today raises serious questions that demand answers. No one is above the law, regardless of position or party." Equally telling was the silence from others who would normally rush to defend him. When asked for comment, the president's press secretary simply stated, "We are reviewing the testimony and have no comment at this time." For an administration known for its combative responses, that silence spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Democratic leadership moved quickly. Speaker of the House Martinez held an emergency press conference announcing that the House would open a formal investigation into Barr's testimony, with possible referrals to the Justice Department for perjury. "What we witnessed today wasn't just the exposure of lies," Martinez declared. "It revealed a pattern of corruption at the highest levels of our justice system. And this cannot be ignored." By nightfall, the Justice Department faced an extraordinary situation. The current Attorney General, Sandra Phillips, issued a statement saying the department would review the evidence and take appropriate action if warranted, but everyone understood the gravity of what that meant. The Justice Department might soon be forced to consider prosecuting a former Attorney General for crimes committed while in office. Legal analysts were quick to dissect the potential legal consequences. On CNN, former federal prosecutor Jennifer Rodriguez outlined the situation plainly. Based on what Representative Crockett revealed, we're looking at possible charges of perjury, obstruction of Congress, and potentially obstruction of justice. Each of these offenses carries serious prison time. Over at Fox News, which initially defended Barr, the tone began to shift as conservative legal commentators acknowledged the gravity of the evidence. "I've defended Bill Barr many times," said conservative analyst Mark Stevens. "But if these documents are genuine, and he hasn't denied that they are, then this is a serious issue." As Barr met with his legal advisors, Representative Jasmine Crockett was experiencing the most significant day of her political career. Her office was overwhelmed with calls from constituents, fellow lawmakers, and media outlets from across the globe. The freshman congresswoman, once considered too inexperienced to challenge Washington's elite, had just confronted one of the most powerful figures in American politics. That evening, she appeared on the Rachel Maddow show for an exclusive interview. Maddow, clearly intrigued, asked the question on everyone's mind. "How did you obtain these documents?" Crockett's reply was deliberate and composed. "Rachel, there are many honest people in government who still believe in the rule of law. When they witness corruption and deception, they want the truth exposed. I simply gave that truth a platform," Maddow pressed further. "But you knew what you had before the hearing. Why let him call you a liar first?" Crockett smiled slightly. because the public needed to see his true nature. If I had presented the documents outright, it might have been dismissed as partisan politics. But when he attacked me, when he called me a liar while he himself had been dishonest, that revealed his character more powerfully than any document could. The interview drew millions of viewers. Crockett's composed, methodical account of how she built her case elevated her credibility even further. By the end of the night, she had gained over 1 million new followers on social media, and political analysts were already speculating about her future. Senator Crockett, Attorney General Crockett, the possibilities seemed limitless. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Republican leadership was scrambling. Barr had long been one of their most respected figures, a symbol of conservative legal authority. Now they faced the challenge of distancing themselves without admitting they had misjudged him. The turning point came when Senator Mitchell, the Republican Senate leader, was caught on a hot mic telling a colleague, "We should have seen this coming. The signs were there, but we ignored them because he was on our side." That candid remark sent ripples through conservative media. Radio hosts who had spent years defending Barr suddenly found themselves struggling to justify why they had overlooked his misleading statements. "We trusted him," one prominent host admitted on air. "He betrayed that trust." Yet, some within the conservative movement saw the crisis as a moment for renewal. A group of younger Republicans released a joint statement urging a new era of conservative leadership grounded in principles rather than personalities. They commended Representative Crockett for her dedication to transparency and accountability, values, they said, that should rise above party affiliation. 3 days after the hearing, another revelation stunned Washington. 2 Justice Department whistleblowers publicly came forward, confirming they were the sources behind many of Crockett's documents. Both were career prosecutors who had served under multiple administrations, and their decision to reveal themselves gave even greater weight to the evidence. In a 60 Minutes interview, they explained their actions. "We took an oath to uphold the Constitution," said one, her voice unsteady. "When we saw that oath being violated by the very person charged with protecting it, we had no choice but to act." The second whistleblower, a veteran prosecutor with 3 decades of service, was even more forthright. Bill Barr corrupted the Department of Justice. He turned it into a political tool. Representative Crockett gave us the platform to expose that corruption, and we took it. Their statements reignited national debate on whistleblower protections and government accountability. More justice. Department employees soon came forward, sharing their own experiences of political interference during Barr's tenure. 5 days after the hearing, Barr broke his silence with an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled, "The Truth About My Service." It was a lengthy attempt to reinterpret the documents Crockett had revealed. However, the piece failed to convince. Fact-checkers quickly identified numerous inaccuracies, and even traditionally sympathetic outlets offered sharp criticism. The National Review wrote, "Barr's defense reads like the desperate rationalizations of a man who knows he's been caught. It's time for him to stop digging." Worse still were the responses from his former colleagues. Several ex-Justice Department officials publicly contradicted his claims. His former Deputy Attorney General delivered one of the most damaging rebukes, stating, "I can no longer stay silent. The documents Representative Crockett presented are accurate, and they represent only a fraction of the troubling behavior I personally witnessed." Beyond its immediate legal and political fallout, the confrontation between Crockett and Barr carried deep cultural significance. It became a symbol of generational change, of emerging voices challenging entrenched power, and highlighted how preparation and evidence could counter corruption. Universities began using the hearing as a case study in political science and law programs. The Crockett method became shorthand for meticulous preparation when confronting authority. For many young women, especially women of color, Crockett represented the power of standing firm against intimidation and falsehoods. The phrase, "but she drops evidence that ends him," became a viral expression online, used whenever someone exposed misinformation or hypocrisy. Merchandise featuring Crockett's image and the slogan, "I brought receipts," became instant bestsellers. As weeks passed, the hearing's effects continued to expand. the Justice Department announced a sweeping review of all prosecutorial decisions made under Barr's leadership, re-examining cases potentially influenced by political interference. Even more consequentially, lawmakers introduced bipartisan legislation to safeguard Justice Department independence. The proposed Prosecutorial Independence Act, co-sponsored by Democrats and reform-minded Republicans, aimed to make it a felony for any political appointee to meddle in specific prosecutorial actions. Crockett became a central figure in this reform effort. Her follow-up hearings on Justice Department integrity drew record audiences, and her ability to collaborate with genuine reformers across the aisle revealed a political maturity well beyond her freshman status. While Crockett's influence and public support grew rapidly, Barr's professional life was unraveling. His speaking engagements were canceled, his book deal was revoked, and several corporate boards quietly requested his resignation. The man, who had once commanded $50,000 per speech, had now become an outcast in most circles. Perhaps more painful than his public downfall was the rejection from the legal community he had long been part of. The Federalist Society, which once celebrated him as a conservative icon, quietly removed his name from its list of distinguished speakers. His portrait at the Justice Department, traditionally placed in a prominent hallway, was moved to a less visible location. Former colleagues and friends distanced themselves. One former Supreme Court clerk who had worked closely with Barr told reporters, "The Bill Barr revealed in that hearing isn't the man I thought I knew. Either he changed, or I was blind to who he really was. Either way, it's deeply disappointing." The hearing's effects extended beyond U.S. borders. Foreign governments that had questioned America's commitment to the rule of law viewed it as proof that accountability still existed. The European Union's Justice Commissioner issued a statement commending Representative Crockett and the whistleblowers for their courage in ensuring that truth prevailed. In contrast, authoritarian regimes attempted to use the scandal for propaganda. "American democracy is just as corrupt as any other system," read one Chinese state newspaper. But such attempts failed to gain traction. Most observers saw the exposure of Barr's actions as evidence that American democracy, though imperfect, remained capable of self-correction. The hearing also sparked a reckoning within the media. Journalists who had long taken Barr's statements at face value faced criticism for their lack of scrutiny. "We gave him the benefit of the doubt when we shouldn't have," admitted one political reporter on a podcast. Representative Crockett did the kind of work journalists are supposed to do. This prompted deeper conversations about access journalism and the reluctance of some reporters to challenge powerful sources. In response, several major outlets introduced new policies requiring enhanced fact-checking of statements from public officials, regardless of political affiliation. As Crockett's national profile grew, she avoided overexposure. She declined many interview requests, appearing only when it aligned with her reform agenda. When asked about higher political ambitions, she consistently replied, "I'm focused on doing the job the people of Texas sent me here to do." Behind the scenes, however, she was quietly building alliances for long-term change. She worked with Senator Elizabeth Warren on financial transparency, with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on environmental justice, and even partnered with reform-minded Republicans on accountability measures. Her once small staff was now receiving thousands of job applications from top policy professionals. "We're not here to make noise," she reminded her team. "We're here to make change." 6 weeks after the hearing, the Justice Department announced a criminal investigation into William Barr's testimony before Congress. The appointment of Special Prosecutor Maria Santos, a respected former federal judge known for her independence, demonstrated the seriousness of the case. Both parties praised her selection, and even some of Barr's allies admitted she would ensure a fair investigation. Barr's legal team quickly mobilized, hiring some of the nation's most prominent white-collar defense attorneys. The irony was unmistakable. The man who once oversaw prosecutions was now preparing to defend himself. The confrontation between Barr and Crockett became the catalyst for sweeping reforms across government. Congressional committees began examining testimony from former officials with renewed rigor. Strengthened whistleblower protections and secure reporting channels were established to encourage accountability. Informally known as the Crockett Protocols, These standards reshaped document preservation and transparency practices across agencies. The hearing also inspired a new generation. Law schools reported surges in applications from students citing Crockett's example as their motivation. She showed us that one person, prepared and courageous, can stand up to the system, one applicant wrote. A year later, the impact remained profound. Barr faced federal indictments for perjury and obstruction of Congress, with legal experts predicting conviction based on the evidence revealed during the hearing. Crockett, now one of the most influential members of Congress, chaired a subcommittee on government accountability and had already passed 3 major reform bills. Rumors of her running for Senate, or even president, circulated widely, though she consistently deflected such speculation. On the hearing's first anniversary, Crockett addressed Congress in a televised speech. "A year ago," she began, "I was called a liar by a man whose career was built on lies. Today we have shown that truth, when backed by evidence and courage, will always prevail over deceit and intimidation." She continued, "But our work isn't done. Some still believe they are above the law. To them I say, we are watching, we are documenting, and we will hold you accountable. The American people deserve nothing less." The confrontation between Jasmine Crockett and William Barr became one of the most consequential congressional moments of the century. It reshaped oversight procedures, strengthened justice reform, and redefined how Americans viewed accountability. For Crockett, it marked the beginning of what many believed would be a historic political career. She demonstrated that preparation, integrity, and courage could dismantle even the most entrenched systems of power. For Barr, it was a complete downfall. Once regarded as one of the most powerful attorneys general in modern history, he now faced the prospect of ending his life in prison. His legacy, once centered on conservative legal philosophy, was permanently tarnished by corruption and deceit, symbolized by the day a first-term Congresswoman exposed him before the world. Years later, the ripple effects continued. The Crockett Standard became the model for congressional oversight, demanding evidence-based accountability. Law schools taught detailed analyses of the hearing, and political scientists studied its impact on Washington's power dynamics. The long-standing networks that had shielded figures like Barr were weakened, while new voices, especially women and people of color, rose to positions of influence. Ultimately, the hearing revealed something deeper about the American system: that courage, backed by preparation and truth, can overcome power and corruption. It proved that no one is above the law when citizens demand accountability. Jasmine Crockett entered that hearing as a freshman representative underestimated by many. She left it as a national symbol of justice and integrity. For those who hold power, Barr's downfall served as a warning. The truth always finds its way out, and no amount of influence can hide it forever. The story of Bill Barr accusing Jasmine Crockett of lying, only to be undone by her evidence, became a modern parable about truth, justice, and accountability. For young viewers, it was a reminder that integrity and courage can change the course of history. For those in power, it was a message that their actions carry consequences. The hearing stood as proof that even in an imperfect system, justice prevails when people have the courage to pursue it. In the end, as Jasmine Crockett proved, truth supported by evidence remains the most powerful weapon of all. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more in-depth political analysis and coverage of moments that shape democracy. Hit the notification bell to stay updated and share your thoughts below. Who do you think should be held accountable next? What truths still need to be uncovered? Remember, those in power may have influence, but as Crockett showed, we have the truth. And sometimes, that's all it takes to make history.